All right. Kind of closure on that one. All right. So anyway, yeah, it's part two. Um, so I'm in this dream, and I look again at the moss after he says that because I looked around and I was like, wow, that's profound, right? Kind of simple, but profound at the same time. And I look again, and the moss isn't there anymore, or the moss is just moss on this rock. And I heard, hey, right over to my right. And I looked, and I saw this like gnomish looking guy, like with like really white hair and a beard that went. And I looked down, and it went over his feet, and he was standing on a rock. But the rock that he was standing on allowed me to see him at eye level, and he had these very just jolly eyes, and like with passion and love and sadness and all sorts of just happiness to him. And I began to kind of peer into them, and he kind of like in like a flash of an eye, like like zipped around this tree to like kind of hide from me, kind of like a little bashful about me looking into him. And then he kind of peeked around peeked around the tree, and kind of smiled, and that was the end of the dream. And I was just like, and I woke up to my friend honking the horn, and he picked me up for school. And so I think this was the day that I accidentally died at school. So let's get on to that. So the this little Satan thing wasn't leaving me alone. I was wondering if he was. I showed up to school. I told this one girl that was my friend's like girlfriend eventually at the time, and she was like, "Oh well, yeah, duh," But I had a feeling that was him too, through her, because she was like another like kind of punky, like gothic, not antichrist, but like not believer kind of person. A lot of that was going on in my high school and my friends for some reason. I don't know. I just were the kind of friends I hung out with. It was just, I was a skater. I liked cool people. I don't know. Christians to me often were fake when I'd go to church. In my mind of them, my opinion of them was that they were just, too good for me. Actually, a lot of it, or like, I didn't. It was also kind of like a dorky aspect. When people like, they're trying to be nice at church, you realize when you get out of church, they're still regular people like me and you. Sometimes they do that. Sometimes nowadays people are a lot more real. I feel when you go in, but so they were in this little circle, and they did that. We talked. I told her. My friend's like, because I told him on a car ride about the dream, and then he's like, you tell her about the dream, and then that's when she was like, oh yeah, duh. You want to be honest with yourself, and you'll find your true path. So I then let's see. Yeah, time went by. It was a weird day. And then lunch came around the corner, and that was the catalyst to the event, to where I um, I went down to lunch, and I had $1.50. Like I said, my mom, I was like, Mom, give me some lunch money. I got nothing. Give me something. And so she pulled out what she had. I mean, she was a single mom with 3 kids. What is she supposed to do? Have a whole bunch of money with this house that she was supposed to have with a husband, and now 3 kids aren't even working yet. Maybe my sister was working at the time. I think she started working actually, but she wasn't helping pay rent. I don't think. It was tough. It was tough times. Those years after the divorce, but so I got down, and I was like, what am I gonna do? I can get food, or I can get a drink with this money. Liquids are probably more important. I'll get a high C lemonade. So I got a high C lemonade. I sat down with my friends. Next thing you know, we're giggling, and I was like, and this was the last day, full day before finals in high school. We had our sophomore finals where they make them half days. And so we made it half days, and we made it to the half days point. Well, it was the last full day, and it was the last lunch that we're gonna have of the year. It was 2002, I believe. It was January, February, March, April, May 15th of 2002, which I thought was kind of cool because it was like, 5 and 15 makes 2002 20, and then inverted back over like a binary. I don't know, not binary, but like just like a butterfly effect. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there at lunch, and I'm going around trying to kind of talk with my friends, another group of hoodlum atheists for the most part. And I don't, and I kind of, part of it was, I think it was like when Jesus talked about like sitting down with the tax collectors. I like to try to like evangelize to them as I was with them. Also, I had a skater friend that he was at the table. He was really the only really reason I was actually at the table. My friend Anthony. He was a skater friend of mine, a baseball player as well. We first played baseball together. We were friends since third grade when he first got to Arizona from Chicago. Anyway, he's there at the table, and he's thinking like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, nothing's, it's just a normal day. It's a lot of pressure because it's the last part before finals. And I yeah, sorry, thinking. I have a thought process situation still, just like anyone, right? But yeah, so it's a lot. Um, I I went to yeah, okay. I sat down. I had a drink. I accidentally sipped my friend's drink. Well, my friend, he decided to use Everclear in his drink. Now, if you don't know what Everclear is one of the most strongest alcohols that we pretty much have on the shelf at the time that I'm aware of, other than like moonshine and stuff like that. I don't even know if some moonshines are even as strong as Everclear, but it's 190 proof, which is like 85% alcohol, and it's a tough one. And I never drank before, so my tolerances were nowhere. If I had drank before, it was another situation where it was like wine accidentally at like a Christmas or something. And so I had the drink, and I was just so perturbed at the time, just perturbed, just everything was going on, and I was just like, screw it. So and I hallucinated like immediately once I had my first sip, but I had that taste. I didn't know what the alcohol taste was. But I was like, but I thought that I hallucinated the girl across from me throw like a dab of acid into the cup, which was like my first hallucination, which didn't make any sense because if I had already drank it, why would I hallucinate that immediately? Why would I think that was it? But I was just stupid, I guess. I've been kind of a dumb guy sometimes. But and so I drank the cup, and I just chugged it after just tasting the first sip. I was like, but I was quiet about it, but I wanted something, I wanted to have an experience. Maybe she did throw acid in it too, I don't know, but I there was just a very weird situation. But so I then sat down, and all of a sudden I just felt different, right? I mean, you would, but I felt like the I don't know. I felt like an emanation coming from above me, from like where the sun would be. And so I looked up, and I saw the sun, and it was like directly high noon, right above me at the time. and I looked at the sun, and it was shining yellowish more, because it was more yellow back then. Now it's more white because the sun's going through a hydrogen to helium transference process they don't tell you really anything about, because they probably don't even really know for the most part. But anyway, that's another thing. And but that's, I think, very also important to say. Anyway, because later on, I began to look into this light, and I could almost feel like it was like the sun, the Holy Spirit was emanating from it. And I was like, wow. That's not to say the Holy Spirit's at the sun, but because to me, I think it's more directly above you at all times, each person. It would probably appear that way when you get to the spiritual realm anyway. Um, but so and then I remember looking across at this girl, and this girl was another person that I happened to be like infatuated with at the time. I had a crush on. I hoped that she would, like me back, kind of thing. And I think that's part of the reason why she skipped class to come down to my lunch that day. Um, and throw a maybe not, or throw a piece of acid in my cup. And so, yeah, they're a weird bunch. And acid wasn't so understood to be a terrible thing at the time. It's not really a terrible thing necessarily. I haven't done it before. I know that it can stick with you for years. Yeah, it could be a terrible thing. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot to this. Sorry, there's a lot of details I'm going to tell you about. And so, yeah, it's like, sorry, just keep going, But anyway, so I just wish I could get it out better. I got up. No. I looked at her, and she was mirroring everything that I would do. It was like if I lifted my left arm, she mirrored it exactly. If I looked up, as I looked up into the sun, she looked up into the sun. And I looked at her like that, and I looked up into the sun, and then I looked back down at her, and she did the exact thing I was doing. And I was like, and then in a blink of an eye, all of a sudden I have my hand on I was like that, and I was like in a second, like not a second, like a millisecond, jiffy. It was just right there, and I was like, whoa! And I felt my friend pulling his hand off of me, and pulling his hand off my arm, and he's like, "Are you okay?" Because he was the only one that really knew me at the table, and I was like, "What?" And he was like, "It was the teleportation thing that really got me." I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Dude." He's like, "Dude," and then he's like, "What did you?" And then my friend next to me was like, "What did you do?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Didn't you see I had alcohol in there?" And I was like, "What?" And then so I did something to like distract them, and I got his cup, and I went to go walk and dump it out, and something happened in between that I don't really want to talk about because that was embarrassing, but it was something to do with the girl. And so I continued to go to the cup, and I dumped it out, and my friend followed me up, and he's like, um, yo, what are you doing? I was like, dude, what are you doing, for one? For two, you shouldn't have alcohol at school. I whispered it to him very kindly. I didn't want him to get in trouble. That's the kind of love I had. And I said, I don't want you to get in trouble, but yeah, and look at me, that's what I said. Like, I was like, you shouldn't have alcohol in school, for one. For two, look at me. I just died. That's what I meant. And he was like, okay, I guess you're right. He stopped being angry, or he was chilled because he was probably drunk too, and he walked away. 16-year-olds, man. And so I went down, and the rest of the day was kind of a blackout. I don't remember a lot of it. I remember I was being kind of promiscuous with some girls, like I had a porn addiction, and ever since I was like 10. So there was probably some situations going on with that. And I remember one girl. I don't know. I just kind of being flirtatious. I don't think I was like sexually harassing anybody. I don't know. I don't remember. But anyway, so I remembered though that we got to the last class. I was kind of starting to like realize this is I can start to remember the day. This was like 2 hours later. So we get to the last class, and the teachers are like, and they never let us out early, ever. But she was like, I know things have been really stressful lately, and we're going to let you out a couple minutes early today. We just decided to do that. So they did that, and I remember it was 2 minutes before the bell rang. And so I get down, we go down to the circle pit where all these friends, including the guy that had the drink, would hang out and wait for our rides, just, or whatever, before we got picked up and left for school or whatever. Sometimes our parents had to get off work. I don't know whatever reasons. We were able to stay at the circle pit an extra little amount of time. And I went down to sit down with them. I hadn't been doing that for very long in this group, but I had brought my guitar to that day too, which was really interesting to me, because I feel like that's my calling, my path, something like that, hopefully. But and I excuse me, I and that's when I sat down and I put my guitar against the wall, and I set my guitar and my amp against the wall. And I sat down in the circle pit. There was 4 sections of it in a square in the middle part of it. It was covered in rug. The ground was covered in rug, and the circle pit was like concrete with like glazed gray paint over it, and it was just like 4 sections. And I remember there was some friends sitting on the right, some of my newer skater, nicer friends that weren't so atheist on the right as well. They were trying to like come sit down too, and they were just kind of looking at me like kind of curiously, because they were like, "What's going on with Drew?" I guess I don't know. Maybe I don't know. But and then anyway, and then I saw. There was a lot of people in the hallway. It was just a full hallway at Desert Mountain High School in Scottsdale, Arizona, 124th Street and Via Linda. But there was plenty of people walking, and then I saw my friend Anthony again, and he looked like he was like nervously walking, like he was like scared Satan walking with Satan in him, or confused. And I was like, or no, it was Brant, because I was like, "Hey, go find Anthony." And he looked at me, and he like went, and he pretended to go find him. And then while he did that, I was like, "Guys, I don't care what you believe." Okay, I was like, "Okay, I care what you believe, but the devil's following me around right now, and I don't really know why, and I'm kind of freaked out." And in that moment, after I said freaked out, my friend Brant comes right to my face, like this close, and he's like, "I couldn't find Anthony." And I was like, "Shit, okay." Like, it scared me. And because I knew, like, I could feel it in him. Like, I could just, like, yeah, I was kind of drunk, but I can have psychosis, I'm sure, but I'm telling you, this was happening before I had any alcohol in my system ever. And so he used it to I don't know. And then I heard in my spirit, I heard God say, "It's time." And I know what he meant. It's time for you to let him in. I was like, "Oh, great." Because I felt him. I forgot about this one point. Before they let us out in the last class, I felt him try to touch my back. But this was like another day, actually, the day before. And I could feel like this spiritual energy, like, try to, like, enter my body through my back. And it was like a chill, like when you jump into a cold lake or river, and you made you kind of like breathe in. And I began to do that. And as I thought of the movie Fallen with Denzel Washington, y'all ought to look that up. It's a very powerful movie, because that's apparently exactly how they move, through touch, these fallen angels. And or they did, maybe they still do, but anyway, and so I remember I forced my breath out. I was like, nope, because I had a feeling, in the spirit, it was like something I knew, and And I remember him looking at his hand and looking at me like, why didn't that work? You know? And anyway, and so that was another day, I think. That was like the day before. Sorry to jump around. That's just how I'm going to do this. And so yeah, I went to my so let's go back to when I was just about to die. Okay, so for like probably the second of 7 times that day. Um, yeah. Um, and so I touched his face, and I remember it was like, if you ever seen The Matrix, there's a part where Neo touches this mirror to his left, and I remember touching his face, and I was breathing in, and I was like, God, you, I know you know what you're doing. Okay, so I did this, and it was like it moved in through me like that mirror. I remember it, I could feel him eventually like kind of step in until I got to like a pretty full breath, and then I remember hearing like a little more. And I think that was actually like maybe Satan saying it, like he needs a little bit more for him to get fully in. And then I realized I had a little bit more breath that I could breathe in. And then I got to the top, and he was like all throughout me. And then I started seeing all these like cartoon images of like a rocket ship and a like some like fireworks going off like on the side, like of my peripheral. My peripheral got really like I could see on the side of my face, it was very cloudy white, like very like I don't know, spiritually angelic, and I could feel really euphoric, like I was on some sort of. I haven't really had a drug that has that kind of feeling. It's I mean, I've tried this or that. Mainly, I just did after this, weed and cigarettes, but I've tried a couple other things. Ecstasy wasn't quite it. It was a full, fluffy feeling of euphoria, and probably just the way Satan decided to make himself feel if he had the power. Maybe that's the feeling of heaven. I don't know, but shit, yeah, I don't know. I just know I felt really euphoric. And maybe people are gonna say, oh, maybe it's just that's what happens when you have DMT and you're about to die, whatever. Maybe that is what happened, but I don't believe it. What I do believe is that I then said, and there were like these heads. It had like 7 or 8 or 10 heads, like that were connected to these arms, and it seemed, and it was like, it seemed to me like in the Revelations when it talks about the Hydra. Maybe that's a completely different thing, but it just had like these arms that were like saying things like 7 deadly sins. I remember like saying like, eat everything you can, and steal things or murder, or I don't know. It was just. And after it got done with that little process, and then it was also going into my head, trying to look through all its different spots, it seemed, to find maybe the keys of hell that I told him that I had in my head. Yeah, it was insane. And then I just sat there, and I was just like, I wasn't that scared at that point, because I knew that Jesus Christ was somewhere in this. I had that to call on, but I didn't at the time yet. I wanted to see how much I could do by my own. And I just said, like, you done? And I'm sitting there, I think, still holding my breath. But, I was just like, you done? And then he's just like, what? And then I was like, y'all had to have some tea time together or something by yourself or something. I was talking about him in his own head, kind of making a joke, joking at him. And just chill out, And he's like, oh, we do. And then I was like, okay. And then I remember my left hand starting to move up on its own, like if you're playing with the Ouija board, and you're moving it. No, you're moving it. Well, maybe the demons are moving it. Maybe someone's moving it, but maybe the demons are moving it, because that's what I felt. That my hand was lifting on its own. And that's exactly what I thought of, and I was just like, okay, we have to do something about this. I'm not going to let them take over me and let me kill everyone or whatever, so uh, I I went. I just just thought of Jesus and the Holy Spirit. Just like whew, it was just clarity. Boom. Everything. No filter around my eyes, on my peripherals. It was just woof, clarity. And and then I could feel he was kind of like maybe encapsulated somehow in me, like and scared as he usually is. Um, Even though he pretends to have this ego, I could tell he was very childish too. Like I remember saying, "Man, you're evil," at one point, and he's like, "You think?" You know? I was like, "Oh, I said like you're the most evil." I remember saying that. And he's like, "You think?" You know, like, just to be a little jerk, be proud of it. And then, but then, then he said, Drew, and I was like, what? And then all of a sudden I felt this like the Satan said, Drew, and then I felt a stitch in my liver, and I was like, ooh, that doesn't feel good, and it's just like kind of like I don't know, like almost like electricity of pain, but not a lot of pain, just it hurt. Please don't try this at home. You will not, you know. But anyway, it's not going to be good for anyone to try to kill themselves. I know that, unless I don't know. God knows, it's up to God. But so yeah, so I felt a stitch in my liver, and then I all of a sudden I looked out, and I saw from the corner of the building, the rooftop, there was a part where the wall and the ceiling connected, and this white orb came out of the top right corner of my eyes, of my like just in front of me, upper to the right, right, like over. That's inverted. Anyway, so I'm putting my right hand up and showing you my left hand. Looks like. Anyway, so uh, and it comes and it hits me in the forehead, like it's twinkling. I could see it, and it hits me right in the forehead. And then at that point, I remember I'm looking around. I used to be in the desert. Now I'm looking around at like this greenery area, kind of like this, but a lot more bland. There was only like one, like kind of like how there's like bushing out there, just like that. That's all I saw, and it was more green, and the sky was way more blue, kind of like it looks like there. But if I were to put my phone up, or if I look at it, it doesn't look that blue to me. And I was like looking around, and then I was like, wow, is this the rapture? Did I just we all just and or did I? It was just me, and so I was like, okay, I might be in trouble here. I'm just a regular human, and I still believed and all that, and I prayed for my sins and went to church and all that. I thought I was doing pretty good at the time, right, honestly, but and then uh, I looked around and I saw, like, I was like, I'm gonna look at this looks like Arizona, but it looks like a different time. And I don't know if it was later or earlier, but it seemed like it was maybe earlier, like maybe when the start of the creation happened, or like around the time where the Earth was a lot more young. I personally don't believe that the Earth is 12,000 years old or whatever they say it is. I believe that that's kind of a don't know exactly how. Just we don't know exactly how much each day in the beginning it took. I do believe Adam and Eve were created here, but I believe that other extraterrestrials came here as well and then continued to create the planet. I just had to throw that in there real quick. To create the population of the planet, the animals. It's a long story, but so I then some people just checked out. So then I I went and ooh, ladybug. I I went and looked around, and I saw that the mountains were covered in greenery to the tops of them. They were higher than they were, but they were the same kind of formations of the McDowell Mountains that I knew of. I looked over to Camelback Mountain, and it didn't have like the camel hump. It had more mountainous to it, and it was also covered in the greenery. I then looked out to like the mesa area, where it's kind of like a flat lane, and I saw that there was like a river. No, I'm sorry, a lake, or like a great lake or an ocean at the end of it, and that I couldn't see the other side of it. So I don't know if it was an ocean or a lake or whatever that was so big that you couldn't see the other side of it. But that's how that was. It was kind of like looking out at the ocean, and then I heard a warm voice from above or from inside or from somewhere say, "Look again," and he meant look behind me. So I looked again behind me, and I saw on this mountain, kind of like over here, but like there was like a valley of it was in between two mountains. This white little like strip just appeared out of thin air, and it began to like mist, and then water started to just kind of pour down onto the ground, and it just started to flood or flow in between the mountain crevices, and then down into eventually that big body of water. And then at this whole time, I forgot to mention, I felt like Jesus Christ. After that light, I thought that light was him. Some say that that's actually what happens when angels will come and they'll take you, and you can feel it sometimes when someone goes if you're sensitive to it. And they'll take the ones who have been written in the book of life before they die, and they'll keep them. Um, and It's so, but I remember Jesus Christ was on my right shoulder, and I could just imagine it, like I could see it, like in my imagination. I know it sounds like a hallucination or something to someone who doesn't want to believe that, but anyway, that's how I recognized it, and I remember him looking up at his father, maybe looking up or just thinking it to his father and asking, "That's enough, right? Like enough of an experience," he meant, so we can go to the next level, and then there was kind of like an agreement, but I also remember at this time I was looking at my arms, and I was like, because I wanted to see how like detailed it was, and I could still see the shine, and I remember saying, even the shine on my hairs, and it was just perfectly normal. I felt like I just walked into another room. Basically, I didn't feel like anything different than that. I remember I still looked the same I was. My, what do you call it, infirmity was still there. Uh, so, and I'm sitting there still, and the next thing I hear, I look up and I see like this mist and these clouds, and they roll around, and behind it the light comes, and it shines, and it says to me, "Drew, what have you done for me?" And I said, "God, you're really going to give me the old rigmarole?" And then he said, "I've done this a long time, Drew." But I did think about that. I was like, really, what have I done in my life so far for him? I've chatted a little bit here and there with some people, but it's not like evangelist going out to save people in other countries kind of thing. Other people have that calling, whatever. But so anyway, and then I get to this. It was like, and I looked at him, and he started showing me like my family, and it was like kind of like these cartoon figures in these really colorful ways, and they were like looking at me like and it was like my family, my friends, and it was like he was showing me like them grieving over my body, and I was like, what? That's insane. And it was very emotional too. It was very gentle, like it was breaking me into this experience very gently, and then next thing I know, I was like, it was, and then he was also showing me in that somehow how Satan's really evil, and he turns on you really quick, because he was trying to be my friend in this little moment before this, and so 35 minutes so far. Anyway, so plus the other first section. But yeah, so I'm sitting there and still sitting, and I'm looking down at the area, but I don't see the greenery anymore or anything. It's more just like this misty, whitish, mostly whitish, maybe a hint of aqua blue in the background. Nothing really to really get distracted on, I guess. and and I'm looking around a little bit, and I and I feel like I'm in the presence of, like, I hear all these people talking. All of a sudden, it's just like I'm in this. All of a sudden, I'm put in this, like, very. I had a feeling like it was like a marketplace of heaven, where there was just like all sorts of noises going on, people talking, maybe some laughter. I remember distinctly there was like a guy chiseling on an anvil, is what it sounded like. Just dink, dink, dink. And I was just like, and then God, for some reason, while this is all going on, I'm sitting here. I was still somehow sitting on the thing that I was sitting on at school. And he told me to say silence. He said, say silence, Drew. And then I was like, silence. And then, like, maybe one person next to me heard me. He's like, and then God said, louder. And I said, silence. And then he's like, louder, Drew. And I was just like, silence, like, so fucking loud. And then I remember, like, someone's after the second loud silence, someone was like, is this it? And then the third sound, the third sound was like, it was just like so loud that everyone just like I can really bellow it. I'm not gonna do it here. I'm on the top of a mountain, and I'm still afraid of, like, freaking people out down here for how loud I can yell. So I'm not gonna do that right now. But I did that, and so I'm sitting there, and then everyone was quiet, and then it was just the chatter was, and then everyone was like looking around like that, and then I remember sitting still, and people, and then everything started, they started gathering in, like, this cone of, like, thousands, millions, a thousand million people. I don't know, maybe it felt like to me like a trillion people were, like, freaking just watching all of a sudden in this, like, this auditorium like sense. And I'm sure somehow, however far away they were able to see this, how it worked. But so we then begin to have this conversation, me and God. And some of it I'm not going to say because it's kind of personal. It's kind of not embarrassing. It's revealing to something that. Anyway, um, I heard this voice, giant voice. Now, I thought it was a giant or an angel. I don't still to this day know exactly what it was, but he said, like, as if he was 40 feet tall, like, maybe, and I'm telling you, huge. And it was a growling voice, and he said, on your feet, for you are in the presence of the Lord. And I was like, and I just put my feet down, like, just set them down as I stood, as I still sat down, because I was being insubordinate. I was perturbed about certain things that were going on, certain, I don't know, it's called spiritual gift that I had, that I believed that was very much a pain in my ass, that I didn't feel was very fair that I had it. Um, yeah, I said that. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be able to explain that in this video here, but so but yeah, I believe that I have had, a unique gift. But so I sat there, and I kind of, I didn't, but I put my feet down all the way to the ground, but I didn't sit down. And the angel, like, knelt down to me. He said, "You know what I mean?" And I said, and God kind of pointed at him for me, because he understood my heart and what was going on and everything. Um, and he just kind of, like, showed the angel, well, you put his feet down. That's when he said, you know what I mean. But anyway, so I continued to sit, because like I said, I died when I believe Satan was in me. So I wasn't about to go anywhere. I wasn't about to stand up. I wasn't about to get off what I was sitting on. I was not going to move. So unless it forced me to, until, and then so I remember, for some reason, my grandma would ask me this question, like, if you had one question to ask God, what would it be? And I thought of that, and so I sat there, and I was like, Drew, what do I gotta ask him? Like, it was weird, when you're it's no different than today, it's just like, if it happened right now, it would happen right now, and it's happening at the moment. It's a very the boggling feeling. And so I was just like, okay, why me? why am I in this situation with the gift and everything? And he's just like, because I chose you. Or he's like, Drew, because I chose you. And I was like, oh, well, I could have told me that. And he like laughed and he kind of chuckled. He said, I knew you could say that. And I kind of thought, I knew you would know. Then I looked around and I was like, okay, well, chose me to do what? And he said, well, that, Drew, I'm going to have you figure out on your own. And this is coming out of like a pure white light that was the size and shape of the sun mirroring down, but pure white. And I could look into it and it didn't hurt my eyes at all to look into it. Um, I think it was especially the more that I realized how much it was just love. And and so I remember just peering into this thing and talking to him and knowing it was God and wondering if this was my judgment day or what, if I was coming back or not. And the more and more I had this experience, the more I realized I was coming back. So then I was like, at that point when he said, well, I'm gonna have you figure it out on your own, and I was just like, all right, what's the meaning of life? And he's like, Drew, now you're just. And I was like, I know, but really, what is the meaning of life? And he said, do you want the definition? And I was like, sure. And he said, to be. And I was like, simple enough. And then he said, how to be. That is the question. And I was like, yeah, huh. At the same rate, I was still wanting to ask a lot of questions, and so we went and continued to speak. I asked certain things about, I can't remember exactly the order of which I asked this, but I was like, reincarnation. And I remember him saying, Drew, did I say that it isn't? And everyone talks about that scripture where man has one life to live, and that is his appointment. It's a point of time to die, and then judgment, right? And then I'm sitting here thinking about that scripture because I know a little bit enough about the Bible. Think or two about the Bible at that of my day, and anyway, but then I started thinking about that, and he said, without even saying anything, he said, Drew, but did I say that it isn't? And then I started thinking, and I was like, that's interesting. I always had a feeling that we had those that were at least not only new spirits but old souls, that mainly most of us are still here, or something like that. Not most people have made it to the near-death experience yet, the afterlife. And so anyway, that was another thing, and I remember asking about, I don't know, there was a time where I asked about like 9/11, I think, and he showed me these two buildings, and there was an eagle that flew by them, and I understood it to be the United States eagle. It was like imagery of that, and it reminded me of this premonition I had when I was in '99, where I was on the Twin Towers. Literally, we took a field trip up there, and I had a feeling that I was like thinking, man, I could just imagine, like, if something happened, someone having to jump off this, how horrible that would be. I don't know why I was thinking it, but it was happening, and then I remember hearing this crash. And my friends that were also in that school at the time, I'm jumping to this other experience a few years back, and it was literally the only premonition I really had like that. I heard an explosion, and I was like, wow, it was like a crack, but it wasn't like deep explosion like you would think in like a movie. It was just kind of like a crack, and then I remember seeing before that too, like a wing of an eagle flying past the corner of my eye. I was like, what was that? And it was humongous, and it flew like you think it like hit the building or flew right next to the building. And then so that's when I heard the crack a little bit, like 10 minutes later after that. And my friends were like, what's going on with Drew? What's going on with Drew? And then they were like, guys, it's time to go. And I was like, what the heck? Okay, so I go down to the elevator and I talk to the guy. I'm like, dude, is everything okay? I just heard an explosion. And he's like, just calmly said, "Everything's fine." And I was like, "Well, what was that?" And he's like, "Well, we've been hearing a lot of things lately." And that's all he said. And then we got in the elevator, and I was like, "How do you, what?" Okay. Anyway, so going back to the near-death experience. So I'm sitting there on my little, the, now I forgot to say too, my friends were still there, but they weren't saying a thing. I don't know if they were actually there. It was just, they were like there to make me feel like I was comfortable to be able to have a conversation. So the girl that I was really obsessed with was sitting right next to me on my right, and I remember her like looking up into the light as well and asking, "Why do guys have that?" Like that was her question. She was like, "Why do guys have that vein on the on their, on their temples?" And I was like, I asked her, I was like, "That's the question you're gonna ask? Like, you got all this infinite knowledge here in front of you?" And same thing for me. I was like, "Why did I ask such a selfish question? I could have asked like something big." That's why I asked, about the meaning of life and everything. But so yeah. So I also remember uh, there was like there was other people watching. I would call it like, I think it's what, the 24 elders were kind of sitting in like desks or something, like in this like oval area above me, around me as well, and they were just kind of like, maybe documenting or observing, and they were very, you could tell they were very wise old men, um, as far as I can tell, these elders, and and again, I can't really see it. It's almost like I could see it, like there was like maybe like a 0.1% like, or like 1% like transparency to the form of it, and it would get stronger and stronger throughout this experience over time, which made me start to feel like I was maybe dying more and more. It was kind of, I don't know, it was weird, but so over the end of it, throughout it, I started to like really give God a lot of crap about the topic of hell. I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. I don't see why it has to be so harsh to people that are wicked, even, And so I remember saying, you know, all right, well, you burn my brothers and sisters and give us this prick, meaning the devil, and we're what, just supposed to be okay with this? And God said, well, yeah, and no, Drew. And I was like, it just irked me, really, of course. Um, and he tried to explain it to me, and I was like, you know, well, why? He's like, well, for one of the reasons he said was, well, they're not with us, they're not with you guys. It's kind of like he was saying, like, it's like when you take people to prison, you don't want them around you because they're not willing to be good, you know. Um, and what else are you gonna do with people that refuse to, they have free will. Um, and then I was like, okay, and he's like, Drew, I was like, what about like, people that didn't get the word? He's like, why don't you let me focus on that, or why don't you let me worry about that? And I was like, still frustrated, because I was like, shoot, well, I know why, because like it's kind of part of my gig to spread that out to people, Anyway, so and then I asked a little bit more about it, and I was like, I still just don't understand like why it has to be so harsh. And I remember him at some point telling me like, it's the fire in hell, that's his wrath. That's his wrath. The fire in hell is his wrath. Um, and that makes sense to me now, seeing what I've seen people are capable of. Even though it's just a short time that they do it, they get to deal with it for the rest of eternity. That's still like, that's it just doesn't really, still having a hard time with that, of course, but uh, you know, um, at some point I wouldn't let go of the topic, and he told me, Drew, beware my wrath. And he was like, I don't want to. He's like, I can't just think of. He didn't say it, but he was kind of like thinking it. Like, I can't think of hell all the time, you know. And but I wouldn't let go of it, and so he did some kind of weird thing where he like kind of cursed me or something like that. And he told me that he was gonna squash me like a fly, and he was gonna knock out all my teeth, almost like knock me down, almost knock down all my teeth until it seemed like there was no hope left. That's kind of remember. I remember he got down like, and then he receded, and he said, "Then I'll build you back up to how I want you." And I was like, "Whoa, bro! Like that was intense. Like you got to be such an asshole about it." It's kind of like my 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 where I was at the time on that. Um, I'm sorry, this is a really weird experience, but it's just the way that it went down. And so, uh, and then this whole time there was this girl that was, at least I thought it was a girl that was, where apparently Satan was the whole time. He pretended to be this blonde woman to my upper front, and again I couldn't really tell, couldn't really see what she looked like. I could tell she was beautiful, at least he pretended to be beautiful, but he was just observing, and he would like kind of be sitting there, kind of observing, kind of asking his own questions. Also scared, you can kind of tell. And I was like, "What's that fear from?" You know, it's like I didn't realize until I met him how freaking scared the devil actually is himself, especially in the presence of the Lord. But at one point, God was like, Drew, do you want me to show you who this is? Because I started to really suspect at a point that it wasn't, that was Satan, right? Because I know that he can, masquerade as an angel of light or whatever. So, and I remember too, in the beginning, I forgot to mention, he asked me to choose an ailment. And I knew what he meant, like choose an ailment to hurt him with. And I was like, lightning. Because I felt he deserved it. And for all the chaos and commotion and lies and deceit and hurting children and stuff that he's invoked people to do all these years. And so God's like, good choice. And I was like, ball lightning? And God was like, I don't know, I might have to. And, for his own sake. But, so anyway, he did this. We got to that point where he's like, Dude, would you like me to show you who this is? And then I could see he got kind of scared. And then he kind of brought him up in front of me, which it was a girl at the time. But then all of a sudden I saw, he lit up with his red lightning. And I just saw it was like, it was the devil. And he looked like kind of like, I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily I could see that he had horns, but like, yeah, it was kind of, I remember thinking like dragon figure. And but it was like electricity was all through. This red electricity was all I really saw. And it showed he was hurt so bad that he couldn't hold that weird form. And at that moment, and at that time, that was when God put him back into reality, and I no longer had to have him in the thing. And then we had more of like a peaceful discussion. It was very beautiful. I asked some more things. I wish I could really remember exactly how it all went down. In order for you guys, but this is the first time I've ever decided to finally do this after what? I'm 40 now. Done wandering in the desert. Hopefully. But yeah. Yeah, it was prolific experience, and I'm glad to have had it. I remember at the end of it, God kind of started to count in a weird way. Like I would just, it was kind of like a personal thing. Just before he asked, he's like, "So what do you want, Drew?" And I was like, he kept asking me that a few times in this experience, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know even what you mean. But then eventually I started to realize like, what's going on? it seems like something's kind of, happening here. And then I remember finally realizing at some point everything was so happening at once and overwhelming that I didn't really recognize the walls had even gone away. It was just, I don't know, I just didn't recognize it. I didn't realize it. And then all of a sudden I asked the question, like, wait, what happened to the walls? And as I say walls, I think I actually said walls when I came back. And like I said, he did like a count back. Sometimes I'd be like 1, 7, 5, 4, 2, 12, and I'd count from 10 down or 12 down, just, I don't know, out of fun. But he did that with me, and it was really kind of beautiful, kind of how he did that. But he had, like, this is just before I think he asked me to choose to either stay or go, and I chose to come back for whatever reasons. I remember saying, like, I haven't really even experienced life yet. I haven't even had sex with a girl yet. Like, I was 16, and I remember even asking him to. He's like, how many? I was like, he's like, he asked me some provisos, like some things, like if it was like a genie or whatever, like some things that I want in my life, and I actually told him, like, can I have, like, like, I don't know, 10 girls, as much as two handfuls in my life, and pretty much, my body count's about that, plus or minus. Won't say exactly, but yeah, it's around there. And so yeah, he did give me that, and everything that pretty much he said that was going to happen, he told me. I was like, all right, Drew, I'll at least tell you this: you're not going to get in a major accident, like a car accident. And I was like, that's good news. I can stop feeling anxiety of that now. Which makes me actually kind of a bad driver, honestly. I'm kind of a reckless good driver now. But anyway, so some of you kind of get that. But yeah, so I think, yeah, that's just what happened to me. That was mainly it. There was some more discussion, some questions. I only had about 30 minutes of time for this to happen. In spiritual realm, it seemed like about 12, 15, 45, 30 minutes of an experience. And then so I began to kind of like, it was, and then I remember it was a very beautiful experience too. I wish I could explain it to you exactly how much it went down and how nice it was to be there. Oh, I forgot about that part. So, okay, so I asked him, when I started to realize that I was going to go back, I asked him to prove or make me feel convinced to me that I was going to end up, that I went to hell. He showed me what it felt like and seemed like to go to hell. Don't ask me why I was bold enough to do it, but I just knew that, like, the way that I am, the kind of weirdo that I am, I was going to need that kind of motivation to actually do his work. And so he kind of did. So what happened was, I started being really insubordinate to, like, kind of, at first he told me no. He was like, no, Drew. Yeah, he's like, and then I kind of just started being insubordinate, asking questions, yelling and screaming about hell. That was kind of the situation about that. And then eventually he kind of told me, Drew, you're kind of on your last limb. And then maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. Maybe it was part of the seeding part of it. But I mean, not deceiving, but like the make me think part. And so I remember I started to sink down a little bit. It felt like, or as darkness started to kind of overcome me. Maybe I stayed in the same spot. I felt like I kind of stood actually in the same spot this entire time. And then so I hear like chains, and then I see to my right. I look, and there's it's darkness, but there's people to my right, and they have their skin on them, and they're looking very scared. And then all of a sudden I see one get like pulled by like a something. I think it was a demon, or a fake demon. This is, I don't know if this was a real experience or like a play that they were showing for me to make me think that I went to hell. So, and then I looked to my left and I saw my grandmother, but she was just in skeleton. There was about 100 skeletons that I could see from the white light that was shining down from me in this darkness. I remember it got to a point to where I put my hand in front of my face. I couldn't see how dark it was, or I couldn't see my face in front of me for how dark it was. But even with the light, it was crazy. And then, but I could see up to my left of me like about, I don't know, 50 people or so. But they were all in chains on their knees, bowing down kind of thing. And I remember hearing my what I all of a sudden just kind of knew was like my grandmother, because she had the same kind of voice, but it was like she hadn't used it in a long time. And um, she she said true, and I was like, grandma. And I was kind of creeped out because I'm looking at a freaking skeleton, but I could kind of see from like her cheekbones, like it was kind of her. And I was like, grandma, just look up, look up. And she knew what I meant. She's like, try to look up, and then maybe he'll pull you out. And then she just I remember her saying, it's too late, Drew. And I was just like, what? Like, she was such a nice person to me, but I never knew that she was a Christian. Apparently she was. They were believers, but I never knew her to be like telling anybody about it. So to this day, I don't know if she made it or not. I believe that she did. I believe this was some sort of like fake hell. Maybe she did have to endure that for a moment, but she got saved through it. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. It's God knows. We'll see. And so anyway, and then I just remember freaking out, like, with everything I've done for you, which really wasn't that much. Like, you did this, and I started freaking out, like, and it's like the feeling of like when you're in a dream and you have like extra emotion, and it's insane. And then I just remember thinking, man, well, I'm gonna be like mutilated by demons my whole freaking existence for the rest of eternity, and I'm gonna be bored sitting here like these people, like chained to this whatever. The ground felt like it was moving, like it was like worms or something, or it was like sand, moving sand. I don't know. I don't even know. And and anyway, so that's later on. After I started freaking out and everything, I started like, and then he started pull me back up out of it. I remember telling them, like, guys, just look up, and maybe I think I remember saying some other words like, forgive yourselves, forgive him, have faith in Jesus, maybe he can help you out. I don't know, something like that. I don't know what I did, but and then I remember pulling back out and then looking around and then being all like upset, and then I just remember God saying, Drew, remember what you asked me? And I was like, oof, right, okay, oof. And then it was about me asking him to show me what it's like. And yeah, so then that was that experience. And I will yeah, and then somehow he did the thing, he did the countdown. I came back, and I remember kind of almost feeling like I was like sinking down, falling down, or just going back down into something, maybe just my body. Oh, I should also mention this too. There was a point in time where I finally stood up, and I remember thinking, okay, this isn't some kind of deal. I don't remember even what he said, but it was something that he said that made me just like kind of cry. I had happy tears in the moment, and it was just something about love, and something I just know that like Satan will never say. So that finally made me, give my honor to him and praise him and stand up on my feet. And then all the people watching were like, oh, like it was just kind of like a cool moment. But and I remember just like standing up and being proud of being being a believer and under the care of this God, of course, and so yeah, that was it. That was basically most of the experience that I could really tell you. He kind of told me the reason for me being there was to butterfly to show you my full potential and to show me my that I had very much potential. Um, and I kind of get that. That has something to do with what I've been doing this whole life. A lot of it has to do with music, kind of like how like a musician has an ability now, especially in these days and ages, to kind of really present their spirit out to the their the world, and the fans kind of grasp it, like they get their personality off of it, and it's like a feeling, a knowing. It's um, like the Bible talks about like this one voice. Like in early parts of the Bible, it talks about like how God gave humanity a singular voice, a singular um, not voice, but like language, and that language is like telepathy, and you know, and somehow, basically, I feel like I really use that through music and stuff, but it gets deeper than that. But anyway, so uh, yeah, yeah, I'm not gonna explain it, but yeah, so that was that, and that was an experience, and I came back, and then I don't know if I mentioned or not, but the bell was ringing right before the bell started to ring, and I remember the bell had still been ringing by the time I came back to my body, and I felt like it had been 30 minutes or so, and so I was just like, oh, that was a while, and but then I was like, yeah, wow, time dilation, and I remember coming back to my body, and my other friend, not my friend, the guy that had the Everclear that was only scared to probably for himself, he knew that I had um, just died, it looked like, and he resuscitated me. I remember I felt like this pain in my back when I came back. I was like I shocked back to my body, and I remember he pressed my chest up against the wall, or the concrete sitting feature there that I was sitting on, and he just kind of gave me like some not mouth to mouth, but like heart kind of pumped my heart, and that's what brought me back, and I just remember saying walls, and people were like, what, walls? And I was like, oh wow, and then I had to soak it in for a second, and I was like, wait a minute, where'd he go? And like, wait, who's going? Like I was like, and then I remember that like I felt like Satan was still in me, and I was like, oh dang it, and then I remember God saying, Drew, get him out, and like my body was like still not recognizing how evil this guy was, and I was like, and then I remember my spirit even told myself, I was like, Drew, really, and then I was like, oh, okay, so then I just chose the first person to my right. It was like the hardest thing I had to do in the moment. I had to give it to her, the girl that I really liked, and I just touched her, and it went over into her. And um, I remember him saying to her, "He just wants you for sex," and I was like, "You little liar, man! You little betraying little asshole! You were just trying to be my friend over here, and now you're doing this, you know." And I just remember saying, "I heard you," and he and because he didn't really say it, it was just kind of like a thing, and like again, like a knowing, um, and um, and then the bell stopped ringing. Well, the bell had stopped ringing probably before that, and that was it. I mean, I was back to, and then I asked my friend, I was like, is there an antidote to alcohol that you know of? And he pointed to the drinking fountain behind me. He said, water. And I was like, okay. So I got up really. He was like, can you help me up, man? I don't mean to be dying again. And so he's like, okay. So he got me by the arm, and he helped me up, and he helped me to the drinking fountain, and I took a drink. And yeah, that was basically that experience. I told you about another several times that I died that time. I don't really even remember. I just remember like it did happen a couple more times where I slipped out of consciousness, and God showed me a little bit more spiritual things. And He brought me back in different ways Himself every single time. Um, for the most part, there was like one time. I'll just say one of them. Nothing else really worth. I mean, there's stuff worth mentioning, but this is already like so long. Um, Maybe I'll speak about them a little later. But uh, yeah. Yeah, I remember I told the girl I wanted to meet her at Subway, and I was like, I'll be there in like 30 minutes. And I got on my skateboard, and drunk is not drunk. I didn't feel drunk. I felt fine really for the most part. I felt a little like more able to communicate kind of thing. Normal drinking is, some of you. And anyway, so I remember like I skateboarded down to my house. Um, and I remember looking around, like wondering if it had been the rapture for how much it seemed like there was like a gathering around me. This whole thing was like maybe like the meeting in heaven that the Bible talked about, like the coming up of souls and the meeting of heaven was how it's put, and that's kind of how it felt to me. Maybe I was put in that time frame, but that'll happen another time. I don't know. Maybe it did happen that day. I remember there being on the news. There were a lot of car accidents that day. I don't know. Maybe it did. Nah, it probably didn't happen. It was probably something weird, just for me. But I don't know. What I do know is that I got back to my school, or I got back to my home. I don't know if I don't know what I did. I got ready a little bit, and I met the girl over at the Subway, and I remember this time where I slipped out of my body again, but I started to pull out. And as I pulled out, I was looking down at myself, and I'm standing there, and I had my arms wide open, and I said, "Drew," and I was like kind of scared because I could see I was scared. So I decided to like, whoa. So I decided to kind of jump back in my body. Well, at that same time, as I jumped back into my body, I also, or like before or after, like, yeah, after I decided to, or like, I don't know if I jumped back into my body. I decided to jump into my body, but I didn't. I then all of a sudden had like another teleportation moment where I was in my body, but I could feel like I wasn't, it's like the body without the soul. And I remember what it felt like. It felt like a lot less emotion, like almost very, very apathetic. I was very much like feeling like I was going to die. Like I felt like maybe claw marks were like through my body in my veins. It was just not a good feeling. And I remember also looking at the girl that I really would have loved, and I wouldn't ever do that normally, but I thought of like killing her and raping her, and how much I wouldn't do it only because I would probably get in trouble for it. And it was like very it was like very analytical. Like that's how I felt, like a zombie, And I was like, dang. And then I remember looking up and seeing me riding on this demon, like my soul riding on this demon, and that's what I was riding up on when I had this split consciousness. I was like riding on what I thought was like a lion. What my soul was experienced was I was on a lion. But then I remember looking at like maybe I was on a demon or something. It was very weird. And so I don't know, maybe that's when the devil finally got out of me. I carried him throughout the whole time. Like I know I said I gave him to that girl, but I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe he got into me again because she was there. I don't know. It's crazy. Eventually, he had to go do things and left me alone. But yeah, that was that day, and I wanted to express that finally. I've been meaning to do it now that I have a bit of a YouTube channel gathering here from taking other people's videos and posting up on YouTube. for the most part. Still feel kind of weird about that, but hey, I've been collecting as many actual legitimate prophetic leaders that I've seen that have actually been doing the work, God's work. I know some people are talking s about both of them, or here or there. I am not seeing them doing anything necessarily to show me evidence that they're false. In fact, I've been seeing more and more of these people, like myself, just trying to get through. Everyone makes mistakes and they're wrong in their own opinions, but yeah, I believe in these people, and if I find out that for any reason that I need to take them down, I will, but for the time being, I've compiled some of the people that I've found. I would put Kim Clement on there, but I just feel like, I don't know, that's more like, I feel like that would be more like, I don't know, I've been afraid to, because I don't want like a check mark. I think they would be like, they seem like the kind of group that has that stuff really patented, or whatnot, what do you call it, copyrighted. So anyway, that was my story. I'm sticking to it. I'm Drew, and yep, Anti-cidle is I guess I'll explain that real quick. It's a band name I came up with when I was in high school around this time. And then later on, I was diagnosed bipolar and put into a mental hospital, and I wrote it down on a piece of tape. And it was, to me, it was the meaningful idea of against killing. Every now and then, I don't know if it was like people that were trying to recruit me for the Illuminati or something like that, but there was people that were trying to convince me that the population decrease was something that they needed me to understand that was important, and I was just like, I'm not with it. So that's where I remember coming up with the idea of Anti-cidle. Also, God told me that in that experience. You probably won't believe this part of it, but he told me, he's like, Drew, I think I'm going to make it impossible for man to kill you. Don't take that as a challenge, please. But yeah, so I wouldn't. Anyway, I've seen some people try to do things to me, and it's been reflected back onto them very miraculously. I promise you that. It's prolific. But God can do anything. He's like the master creator of this universe, and he can, manipulate all the dimensions and realms and time frames, whatever there is. I personally believe that there aren't infinite timelines. I don't think that I think that's just, every decision that's ever been made, can be made, is out there somewhere. Come on. That's a lot of reality. I think more of it, that what's going on is time is getting pushed into a true timeline. All the different fractals of time that these time travelers and stuff have created, or whatever, dimensions, they're all getting forced into this one right now. So anyway, that's my opinion on it. That's something that maybe none of you have really even heard about yet, but that's, there was another thing about I had an abduction when I was younger, an alien abduction, and I talked to God about that too, and he asked me to go into it, and I didn't want to. All I said was, that was real? And I was like, okay, that's as much as I want to talk about it. And he wanted me to go and dive into it more, but I just decided not to, and he respected that. But that was that. So yeah, anyway, I'm gonna go now, and I'm gonna drive home. I'm in Cali, but I need to get back to Arizona and do my normal work, boring work. Hopefully I'll get into this musician thing better. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much. I hope this is able to get uploaded with no problems. And I hope you all have a beautiful day, and just keep Jesus in your heart and know that he's there and he loves you. He loved me very much. There was more to that. Maybe I'll put some more detail in this again and do this video, because he did talk about some things with me. I guess I will say that Jesus was very passionate, very awesome character. I'd never met anyone amazing in my life compared to him. He seemed like a really loving, like people say, like he's not afraid to be your brethren. Um, he he reminded me a lot of myself, a lot. Um, he had a compassionate, like he had a strong laugh, you know. Like I remember him just like it was cool, but then yeah. So I uh, and here I remember him, you know. Oh yeah, I asked about like sex, and he said, "Are you keeping it to one mate?" And I was like, hmm. And he was like, "You know what a mate is, right?" Some of y'all get that. Yep, a man and a woman can make a child. Anyhow, what else? Yeah, there's a lot, but that was about as much as I'm gonna put into it. So, um, yeah, just I'd ask you all just also to pray for me. I got some things going on in my life. Um, I'm just a normal human being trying to handle a lot of pressure. Um, like we're all going through it right now. It's January 25th or 6th in 2026. I heard this is going to be a year to shaken and awaken the church back into what they need to do. Um, I heard 5 major events are going to happen. That's Brandon Biggs on YouTube if you want to check him out. He's a guy that saw that Trump got shot in the right ear and stuff. That's where he really blew up. But anyway, so yeah, I'll end it with that. Thank you all very much for listening. I hope you enjoy it, and just know that this is my heart. I said everything true that I thought I could possibly say. So, all right, love you all. Bye.